Hi. So I was gonna make a video about this a while ago and then decided that it was too clickbaity, nothing new is being said, too ranty, whatever, but I have been triggered. We have a mouse in the house. What does that mean for me? I want to rant about the things that I hate about Toronto. Quick side note, I just want to say, I know this is kind of a funny video to be putting up with all the insanity that's going on in the States, but I just needed to rant. I am grateful for where I live. Look, there's a lot of things I love about Toronto. Don't get me wrong, I'm aware of my privilege. I have a home. I'm very grateful for that. But there's a lot of things that I regularly want to punch Toronto in the face for. It's pretty much just a few basic things, and we're gonna talk about them today. Why not start off with the most relevant issue? Pests, which is strongly related to the cost of living in Toronto. It is really hard to be an artist or creative individual of any sort in Toronto. Toronto is a big city with a high cost of living, and so this is obviously not an issue that is unique to Toronto. It's an issue in any big city. But I think this has only somewhat recently started to be the case for Toronto. Man, I'm gonna be saying Toronto a lot in this video. And by recently, I mean like past 10 to 20 years. Maybe I'm completely ignorant in that amount, but that sounds about right to me. So, you know, the trick here is, the catch-22, of course, is any big city is a great place to be if you want to be in entertainment, if you want to be a creative individual. I can't talk. I had less than 4 hours of sleep last night. For obvious reasons. Where was I? Oh god, I don't remember what I was saying. Right. If you're not making like over 60,000 a year, even with 60,000 a year, you're not gonna really, if you wanna like live comfortably while renting, you're not gonna be able to save up for a house super quick or anything. It's not like that's like even a super comfortable salary to have here. So if you're below that, you're in the scenario that I am, where you have to live with roommates, and if you're actually like a full-time or almost full-time artist, you know, really trying to make it, you have side gigs in order to keep yourself going, you're like on the poverty line and you cannot afford like even over $1,000 rent, and you're trying to find the cheapest option. With roommates, it's doable, but a lot of the time you will end up in places where there are going to be some issues, potentially. For example, the place I was living in last summer that I was subletting, there was a gaping hole in my bathroom wall, and I'm glad that I had never had any rodent issues before I moved into that place, because I probably wouldn't have moved into that place if I had previous issues. Because when you see a gaping hole in the wall, you think, old house in a big city with gaping holes in the walls, probably not an ideal scenario. But that just didn't even occur to me because I was a sheltered little bitch, and I didn't think about it. Now, this is making it sound like I entered into some horrific situation, which I did not. It was actually a pretty charming place. I actually loved it there for the most part. It had a really cute backyard. However, we did, at some point in the summer, become acquainted with a rat in our kitchen. Now, when I say become acquainted, luckily, I don't actually mean that I saw the rat. However, this is how I discovered its presence in our home. One morning, typical morning, I'm getting up, getting ready to have breakfast, making my coffee, reach for my loaf of bread. It's gone. Nowhere to be seen. My entire loaf of bread is gone. And I think to myself, how strange, how curious. Maybe my roommates thought it was their loaf of bread and they ate the entire thing since last night. So it was a big mystery to me. I may have texted my roommates in the group chat being like, did anybody take my loaf of bread or something? But I probably didn't, actually, because that's not really, I'm very non-confrontational in that way. So I kind of just like chalked it up to a mystery, assumed my roommates took it, didn't think it was a big deal, went on with my life. Eventually, upon inspecting and investigating the area around which my bread disappeared from, I discovered that my chocolate bar had tooth marks in it. Teeth marks? Tooth marks. It had been bitten into through the cardboard. It was like one of those flat chocolate bars, salted caramel probably, with the, you know, like paper, hard paper, cardboard covering, wrapping, package. Yeah, so it had eaten through my chocolate. Not all of it, but it got a nice good little sampling. And so then I was like, okay, then I started to feel a bit ill, considering all of the pots and pans on that shelf that the rat had probably walked over. Started to spiral into an OCD mode of wanting to clean out my entire kitchen. But my laziness overpowered that. And that's why I think when I texted the roommates and I was like, I think we have a problem. But I still couldn't find the loaf of bread. I didn't know where the loaf of bread was. And then a couple days later, I noticed the bag from the loaf of bread. It had been tucked away into this corner of the kitchen underneath our cabinets, which was another gaping hole in the house, in fact. Huge. Just wide open, like a slot under the cabinet. That was just open, ready and available as a nice walkway for your typical Toronto rat. Now, why do I insist that it's a rat and not a mouse? Well, because it took an entire loaf of bread. It dragged an entire loaf of bread from a shelf and into its lovely, disgusting corner. So I was pretty sure it was a rat. And then, so here's the thing. Here was the interesting thing about that experience. Knowing that its main area was the kitchen, it had a lot of appealing things in there to enjoy. Even though my room was on the main floor with the kitchen, I wasn't too worried about the rat coming into my room as long as I had no food in there, because rats are pretty big and there were no holes in my room, luckily. So I didn't think it would have any way of getting in there. And so I was like, you know, I was a little disturbed. I was pretty disturbed, but it didn't last too long. And we got these like frequency repellent things, which I've now discovered don't work, at least for mice. But we put those in our kitchen and we didn't seem to have the problem anymore. So maybe those specific ones did work for rats, but I don't know for sure. But yes, after that we didn't seem to have any more problems. I calmed down again. I went back to my normal way of living, and that was nice. Fast forward to, now this one is interesting because it's maybe partially my fault, or it's like somewhat of an unusual circumstance. But in the last place I lived, which was the place after the place I lived in last summer, I've moved 3 times in 1 year. And that's actually also related to this whole cost of living issue, which I'll get into, I guess. Right. I actually already told this story in my intro video, I think. So let me just give you a shorter version of this one. So in my last place, I had this garage practice room in my garage. And I was very lucky to have that. It was incredible. It was like the best thing I've ever experienced, to be able to have the freedom to play loudly whenever, whatever time of day I want, in basically a soundproofed room. It was a dream. However, it turned into a nightmare in early quarantine, late March 2020. I noticed some bites on my ankle, and me being somebody who has pretty intense bug-related anxiety, quite specifically those that shall not be named, bed bugs, I immediately thought, oh dear Jesus God, my worst nightmare has come true. Now, I had had scares like this before where I thought I was getting bed bugs or that I had gotten them. However, and let me just say, like, praise the Lord that that's not the issue I'm dealing with right now. Thank God, because I think that would be much worse actually than a mouse. But this is what I thought was going on back in March at my last place, because for the first time ever, I actually had some bites to justify my paranoia and anxiety. So I got my landlord to come and spray. Well, we had an inspection done, and basically they couldn't confirm, and they were like, let's spray just in case. And to this day, luckily the bites went away after that, but to this day I still don't know what it was. However, the pest guy said that because the bites were like mostly on my legs, lower legs, that was not indicative of bed bugs because they tend to bite more in your upper body, and that it could have been fleas, which I'm also no stranger to, and that's another story time. We don't have time for that. But this may have been my third encounter with fleas in my life, and I wondered if, after the fact, if it had to do with the squirrels that were coming in and out of my garage, through the holes in the garage, and they had brought fleas into the practice room, and I got fleas. I actually got them to spray that room as well. But then, now we're going into some disturbing content, trigger warning, TMI. I figured this would be a good time to seal up the squirrel holes in the garage so as not to continue the issue, so that we weren't spraying for no reason. And so then, of course, even though I said, you know, let's try and make sure that there are no squirrels in the garage before we seal up the holes so that they don't get stuck in there and die, they did seal up the holes without checking, and we did have a dead squirrel in our garage that we had to dispose of. Yes, I have gone through that experience now myself. Luckily, it was not I who dragged the sleeping bag that the poor creature had expired on into our garbage bin. It was my roommate, but I did spot him. Still a pretty disturbing experience. So that was number 2, the second rodent related experience, and what inspired the name of this channel, really truly. I had a very squirrel focused life at that time. I mean, by the time I started my YouTube, it was summer, so it had been a few months, but you know, they were still hanging out in that garage with me, and somehow no other bite issues occurred. And that brings us to our current moment in time. At the place I live in now, which you have seen as my background for the last few months, things were going surprisingly well for an old house downtown. Again, all fingers crossed, thank Lord Jesus, that no other type issues have occurred, and may they not ever occur in this house while I'm here, bug related stuff. But we have discovered a mouse in our kitchen. One of my roommates thought she saw something running away on the floor in the kitchen like a couple months ago, I think, and me and my other roommate were like, oh, it was probably just a centipede or something, don't worry about it. And one of my roommates has been living here for a year before me and my other, so there's 3 of us. Me and one of my roommates moved in August. The other roommate had been living here for a year before that, and she was confident that there were no type of pest issues going on, so we didn't want to spiral into that. We didn't worry. Then, a few days ago, I don't even know anymore, the same roommate that saw something a couple months ago, the other new roommate, this time confirmed a mouse in our kitchen. She saw it. So we got a pest guy to come in. He set up a trap under our dishwasher, which is where apparently it was its main source of activity. There was like cold air coming in under there, so there was clearly a hole to the outside. Now, there's no way we can guarantee that that was the only hole or couple of holes in this house that go to the outside, because it is an old house from the 1800s. And so he installed the one trap, and I was feeling better, even though I had one mouse-related nightmare a couple nights ago. And then last night, this same roommate who initially saw it, saw the mouse run out of her garbage can in her room at like 2 a.m. We were both up. So you can imagine how well rested I am today. And I've been doing some research, and I'm gonna get some peppermint oil, I think, to put in my room to at least deter it from my room. The only thing I don't know is if it's gonna get confused with, like, I'd hope basically it's being attracted to the trap in the kitchen and it's being deterred from my room with peppermint oil, that it won't get confused or anything, and that it'll just go into the trap and leave me alone and not come into my room. Like, yeah, they're cute and whatever, but it's not cute. Okay, it's not cute when you're trying to sleep and all you can think about, all you can see in your mind's eye is these very quick little slithery little motherfuckers. Every single time I started to drift away last night at like 4 a.m., because that's how late I had to stay up to get tired enough because my adrenaline was running in order to be able to even get sleepy. Every time I started to drift away, my mind's eye pictured a mouse running into a corner quickly. Every single time. It was like this. It was like this. Times 50. So I'm doing really well today. I have hope the issue will be resolved. According to the pest guide, there seems to not be a huge amount of activity. Hopefully it's only one mouse. We'll get it taken care of. The peppermint oil will fortify me, will act as my fortress in here. At least I can have my sacred space in my room. Honestly, I don't even care if it's like hanging out in the kitchen for the most part. I just, when I'm sleeping and I don't know what's going on around me, that's what really fucks me up. And to the fact that I can't fall asleep as a result of that, when I already have so many sleeping issues. Like, if you still haven't seen my video about that, it's time. Check it out in the, oh god, I always get confused if it's gonna be the side that you're gonna see it on should be this side. Anyway, video here. I'll also put it in the description for you to make your life easier. Okay, that concludes the rodent diaries, and hopefully it actually concludes in real life soon as well. Coming back to the general point here. I feel like if I was a baller, okay, I would not have come into contact with these kinds of issues as many times as I have. And the fact is, you have to be a baller to live in comfortable circumstances in this city. A fucking studio apartment is almost $2,000. Like, what? Here's the thing, okay? In relation to other big cities that have kind of similar price ranges, okay, like New York, LA, there is so much less argument to be made for this city having that cost of living from my perspective, because the other two main things that I hate about this city, the weather sucks dick, and it's fugly. Toronto decided to tear down most of its historical architecture and replace it with dystopian fucking glass walls everywhere. And if you're a fan of that, I'm sorry, but I extremely disagree with you. And yes, there are a lot of really nice residential pockets in Toronto, in downtown, even midtown if you're going for like the bougier thing. Yes, it's walkable, it's lovely, but the core is a piece of crap. The skyline, I don't give a fuck about the skyline. I don't care about views, I don't care about high-rise anything. And I just feel like that's becoming Toronto's identity. for the most part. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyone who comes to the city as a tourist would like, when you're a tourist, you go to the core, basically. Like, unless, well, maybe not these days. People are much too advanced in everything they do, and they will find the cool pockets. However, there are plenty of cities in the world that the cores are actually really pretty and beautiful and not disgustingly, horrifically modern and ugly as fuck, in my opinion. You know, at least in New York, you have that historical architecture. At least in LA, you have the sun and the warmth blasting you for the majority of the year. And the ocean and beautiful mountains and hills, even though the windy roads give me anxiety. What we have in Toronto is glass boxes and depression-inducing weather for at least 6 months of the year. From November to fucking May. I don't know if you can tell by this lighting, but it's blue as fuck because it's cloudy as fuck and dark as fuck out there. And when I woke up this morning, it felt like it was still nighttime. I have to have my lights on. We have to have our lights on pretty much all the time because it's dark all the time. And also our living room, which isn't actually a living room, it's just a kitchen. The one window in there faces a brick wall. So that's what we're paying exorbitant rent for. I personally don't pay exorbitant rent because I live in a tiny box as my room. So, you know, it's a give and take kind of thing. But without making this a super rambly video, that's a little bit of a chit chat, a little bit of an introduction for you about the things that I hate most about Toronto. A little bonus feature is the transit sucks ass. We have like 2 subway lines basically. Yeah, they're being expanded, but really slowly. And buses are a shit show. They hardly ever come on time. They're super crowded, I guess, during this pandemic now. Maybe not as much. I haven't really been taking transit as much, obviously. But yeah, buses are generally a nightmare. So yeah, it's funny because, I mean, if you live downtown, it is quite walkable and I can get away with that. But if you have to like go to a store that's farther away in some other area of the city, if you have friends that are distributed across the city, like there's many times I've chosen to walk instead of take transit because it's almost the same time estimate and I can do it for free instead of paying money for it. So there is a massive squirrel walking across my garage roof right now with some food in its mouth. They're rampant. They're fucking rampant. Oh, and last thing in terms of the weather also, oh great, we have summer for like 2 months, but it's sticky and muggy and too hot and moist and disgusting. It's actually pretty good for my hair because it does this cool floof thing. But anyway, we're gonna leave it there. Sorry, not sorry that this was very much a ranting rage video, but it felt pretty good. It felt like some therapy that I needed. So if you can relate, fucking comment below. Let's rage together. And I know that I obviously didn't touch on a lot of other issues that Toronto has, and I know that I'm privileged and all of that. I'm not super comfy right now, as my privileged self would say, and I felt the need to just discuss my own personal issues. There are many people out there who could do an informative video about the issues in Toronto much more extensively and accurately and appropriately than I could, just putting my awareness of that out there. So with all of that being said, thank you for watching. I am going to film my next video now, which you will have seen weeks ago because that's just how this is going. See you next week.